Welcome to the Authority File, the podcast that features conversations about the life cycle of scholarly communication. I'm Bill Mickey, your host and the editorial director at Choice. In this episode, Choice editor Daniel Pfeiffer and I continue our conversation around library technology and AI. Okay, so Daniel, let's zero in on artificial intelligence a bit more because how can we not? But let's look at it in the context of higher ed and librarianship in particular. What are some of the big trends you're seeing?
So I think the main challenge that we're going to see going forward, especially here in the next year or so, is that AI is just going to become a buzzword. I think that already you see this. I mean, if you just watch like TV commercials, it's like AI powered heartburn medication, AI powered Coca Cola. We're just going to see AI just dropped everywhere. We see the same thing with like the word like innovative or innovation. In some sense, like it's just sort of lost its meaning. It's sort of just a marketing term. And I think one of the dangers that we're going to face in discerning this landscape is, what is AI? Is it actually going to be something that's useful? Is it just something that, you have to put on your product name in order to show, this is trendy, this is new, this is cutting edge. And I think like that final point there about trendiness, it reminds me of something that we published early on our blog by the writer Meredith Farkas. The post was on slow librarianship in tech. And she makes the really astute point that, as much as universities want to focus on innovation, so much of library technology work happens, very far away from the bleeding edge of innovation. It's often, things that are invisible or, this work of maintenance of keeping things up to date. And it's not always just, the most flashy or the most glamorous work, but it's all still very vital. All the same, I think that there is a lot of interest in, how can we use AI in practical ways? I think that a lot of us are over this initial panic that it's going to take our jobs. And some of us are, maybe curious about, we have certain tasks that, we'd be very interested in offloading onto AI, that we can see like certain ways that it can make our lives easier. And so I think that going forward, we're going to be seeing a lot more applications within, say, like university services and software and databases and things of that nature. But I think that right now, a lot of attention has been put onto the concept of AI literacy, as this is, kind of our current problem. How can we train both students and faculty, as well as staff and just the public in general? How can we train them into understanding how AI works? How can we train them into thinking about the ethics of AI, about its applications, its potentials, its drawbacks? And there's certainly just been a lot of interest in, the more of like the developmental frameworks of AI literacy. And so I think that, even as these applications are just sort of like slowly kind of trickling out, maybe in ways that are going to be legitimate and are going to stick, and maybe in ways that might be a little bit trumped up, I think that by sort of focusing on AI literacy in the immediate term, we really are kind of setting up some building blocks for ourselves.
Yeah, no, that's excellent, Daniel. I mean, I can recall very clearly, among some of the first things that we talked about on LibTech Insights was just simply prompt engineering. I mean, that was like, okay, if we're gonna use this, like, let's at least, uh, figure out how to use the search box or the prompt
Right.
box. And it kind of developed from there. And like you said, it really kind of zeroed in on librarians actually were very interested in sort of the literacy aspects around AI and kind of looked at the frameworks around information literacy as or looking at that for inspiration to develop a framework around artificial intelligence literacy. And it's twofold. Like, and I think you mentioned this too, is where it's very important for us to kind of look at this like, okay, this is going to become part of our job. We need, as professionals, as part of our professional development, to become literate in AI. And from there, we need to be able to, provide literacy training for our colleagues and students across the institution. And not coincidentally at all, Choice has commissioned a white paper um, with a couple of librarians who, and we're actually in the final stages of producing this white paper. So it's due out at the latest by the end of August. That essentially creates a literacy framework for using artificial intelligence in the library. And Daniel, why don't you kind of provide a little executive summary around that to give us a teaser on what might be coming out?
Yeah, so the white paper proposes a framework that in some ways is based off of the ACRL framework for information literacy, but in other ways really sort of moves past it. They conducted interviews with, I think, 15 librarians who, many of whom are already teaching about AI, whether that's like in a classroom setting or, more like one-on-one, and interview their processes for, how have you been engaging with this topic? How have you been trying to teach AI literacy? And they just sort of found that the current approaches were inadequate. And as much as helpful as the ACRL framework is as a point of departure, it is only that, a point of departure. And so they develop a framework that both tries to establish like very baseline competencies. You need to understand like what AI is, how does it work, and then it builds into these larger questions about how the ethics of AI and how we're actually going to deploy it within academic settings in smart and responsible ways. And so I think that readers walking away from this white paper will really have a good touchstone going forward to, how can we start developing pedagogy and learning objectives based around AI ethics.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well said. I think, and part of this, one element of it that fascinates me is, we've seen quite a bit of discomfort around AI from librarians in the sense that they're not totally confident that they're up to speed with it. And I mean that in sort of a general sense. And there was an April podcast series of the Authority File that explored a report from Sage and Skill Type around more broadly talking about professional development and skill development for librarianship. But AI was part of that, and there was a survey related to that report that revealed that respondents who were librarians were not feeling very confident around answering questions from students or faculty about AI and how to use it and how it's being used, on campus. So I think, we're absolutely entering into a phase where that sort of educational part of, use case scenarios and the ethics and sort of standardizing certain approaches to deploying AI on campus is kind of where we're at. But I think in the meantime, outside of the institution, among sort of let's just focus on academic publishers, you know, introducing AI and AI layer into their products is kind of a no-brainer. I mean, it's an amazing marketing tool, as you mentioned earlier, Daniel. But I think publishers over the last year or so have been pretty careful in terms of how they've decided how they want to deploy AI within their product platforms. And, I'm talking about like the ProQuests or the JStores or the Elsevier's, who are creating these research assistants that are trained around, you know, the LLM essentially becomes the walled garden of journal and book content that these publishers have amassed over the decades. Um, and sort of helping researchers and students with their sort of natural language searching around the content. And, publishers have been really focused on sort of how AI sort of surfaces results and presents them to the user in a way that's, that the user will trust, and presenting relevant diversity of alternative content for them to use. But again, it's they're being very careful around obviously accuracy. I mean, they have a leg up because the AI is trained on their curated, vetted content that they already have. But um, nevertheless, I think we're so used to kind of using AI in a open web kind of application
Mhm.
perspective that, some of that trepidation might carry over into the publisher realm, and they're working hard to sort of make sure people feel comfortable using it in the context of their products.
Yeah, as I said earlier, I think that we all have like a few parts of our job that like we think that AI would actually be really helpful here. And I think for me looking back, like it would have been really helpful when I was doing research to take like a PDF and just say, hey, just a one paragraph summary. That's all I need. I just need to make a decision whether or not I am going to read this, or um, if there are any resources that are adjacent to this that I should know, or it makes a reference to something that, or a scholar whose work I'm unfamiliar with, but I just need like a broad overview of what they've done. And I think that there is like a lot of just like really practical potential that like these AI layers can in fact have. And so I am very optimistic about how they can, or about how publishers can leverage that, because I think that researchers will very easily like see ways to deploy these technologies within their workflows.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, with the advent of AI and sort of the research workflow, the phrase academic integrity has become, I keep seeing it all over the place. I mean, it's so important. And I think publishers generally have, and the commercial side, at least in the academic space, is making sure that academic integrity is at the core of what they're providing. Apropos of that choice, of course we do reviews. That's our um, primary business. And so what we've done very recently is we've come up, well, essentially we're going to be reviewing these products. So publisher products that have an AI layer, we're going to be reviewing the functionality of that and including those reviews in our daily reviews of other academic resources. So we've come up with a rubric for our reviewers to use as they're looking at these products, and it's unique because it's different from the rubric that reviewers tend to use, obviously, for monographs or other digital resources. And we created this because obviously our artificial intelligence layers and scholarly products, we've never seen this before. So I mean, I think it deserves its own set of guidelines for reviewing this. And so essentially what we're looking at is, In a review, you'll see like a brief product description, what it is, who the intended audience is, its main function. And again, as we've been describing, we want to look at contextualization, what's the use scenario, and how does it fit into the library or integrate with a library's digital holdings, if at all. And then it's like, how well does this thing do what it's supposed to do? How well is the AI layer presented in the user interface? Is it self-explanatory? Is there sufficient help? How well are the results presented or explained or enhanced? And again, how does this product support trustworthiness, reliability, and confidence in the results? Is the user made aware of, where these results are coming from? And and then obviously we want to look at how these things are priced. How much is it going to cost a library to quote unquote upgrade to a product that they might already have, but include the AI layer in that. So yeah, I mean, we're pretty excited about that, and some of those reviews you should start seeing those probably by the end of this year, and certainly into the new year.
Yeah, I think that our slightly skeptical approach toward AI, we understand that, it's going to do a lot of really good things, but, we also need to understand that, some of it's hype, some of it is um, a bit blown out of proportion. That's what the work of a review does. It sorts out what is this saying that it's going to do? What does it actually do? Is it worth it? And so I think like in that sense, our reviews that we're going to begin doing, it's really necessary for navigating this landscape, especially at a time where there is this market that's booming, and uh, some people are going to take advantage of that in really sincere and helpful ways, and other people or other firms may be doing it a little bit more opportunistically. And so I think that developing these reviews is really key to begin sort of sorting through this landscape and developing more of an atmosphere of trust and just pragmatism in general, I suppose.
Right. Perfect. All right. Well, Daniel, that's all the time we have. Thanks so much. That was fun. Thanks for joining me on the program.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Bill.
That was Daniel Pfeiffer joining me to discuss the launch of our newest blog channel, LibTech Insights, and the ongoing trends around library technology and artificial intelligence. As always, underwriting opportunities for the Authority File podcast are directed by Choice's advertising director, Pam Marino, and all of our episodes are produced and edited by Choice's digital media producer, Sabrina Kofer, with support from digital media assistant, Ashley Roy. That's all for this week. Thanks for joining us.